Hello and welcome to a very interesting edition of CNBC-TV18 Conversations. My guest is Peter Koerte. He is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Strategy Officer for Siemens. Now, Peter over the years has been recognized as a thought leader in the entire gamut of digitalization, artificial intelligence, and decarbonization. So we have a lot of questions for Peter. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lata, for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor, too.
Well, for starters, what made headlines for Siemens India is this very big order that they got, over $3 billion order for making locomotives in India. If you can tell us, which are the other sectors that Siemens India is interested in India?
For one, there is, as you mentioned, there is the whole railway industry and the electrification, which obviously is dearly needed. The second part is infrastructure, and it's about smart infrastructure. It's about buildings, grids, enabling the decarbonization of the economy. And the third one is all about the industrial sector. So really bringing green and competitive companies that are on a global scale that can expand the reach of India.
Okay. Well, all those are needed for us, stopping emissions. But I was captivated by something that you all said in your Innovation Day, that you are into e-fuels. And if the internal combustion engine cars used e-fuels, then they don't really have to die away. They don't have to be replaced. Is that a very promising technology?
So e-fuels is considered a bridging technology. So I think there's general consensus that if you take the entire energy generation from, let's say you do it through solar or wind, and then the distribution, conversion, and then finally usage, it's very inefficient if you use e-fuels, because it takes a huge amount of renewable energy to create e-fuels that are then burned in an industrial combustion engine. So the better idea is indeed actually just to ship those green electrons all the way directly to the car, into a battery, and then drive off. But we know this is not going to happen overnight. We know that cars, and in particular trucks, very important trucks, they're here to stay for decades. So therefore, it is a bridging technology for sure.
Okay. It's a bridging technology, so we have to be prepared for electric vehicles.
Yes, we have to.
There isn't too much of a life for ICEs.
There is not a life for ICEs. There's the conversation about hydrogen in particular for those applications where there's a long distance and for very heavy duty vehicles such as tractors, trucks, any kind of this size, that might actually have hydrogen as an energy source, but not so much the e-fuels, and for sure not the way we think about it today.
Okay. Now, the other part of your presentation, which was very fascinating, was this digital twin.
Yeah.
Now, to what extent is it in vogue, for that matter, in Europe? And do you see a lot of Indian companies asking you to make a digital twin for their factories?
Yes, we do see digital twins all over the place. So you can have them on a very small scale level, even on a molecule level, so that you can look at the compounds that form certain pharmaceutical products, right? So you can really look at small, micro, nano structures and take a look and do a simulation. Then you can build it for, let's say, a part or a machine. Then you can make it larger for factories, and you can make it even larger for entire city districts or even nature, coral reefs, that kind of nature. And the benefit always is that you can solve real-world problems in the digital world. Why? Because you can do it much faster. Because once you have digitalized the whole process, you understand nature, you can simulate, you can optimize, and then you can feed it back into the real world.
But is it much in vogue in India? Are people asking you for
yes,
factories to be set up both with the digital twin?
Increasingly more, increasingly more. We see this today more on the machine level, on the machine part level. We see this from the pharmaceutical industries. We see this from the semiconductor industry. They're very, very interested in it. Because the digital twin is in particular interesting for those industries that have huge expenditures in terms of capex, and that are under intense time pressure. So think about, you mentioned the EV vehicles, batteries. Batteries are really needed, and you need to build them. And so digital twin can help really to accelerate and make them more efficient.
Okay. Well, when you are approached by companies in India for digitalization, or for that matter, anywhere, they're not always asking you for a brownfield or for a greenfield factory. They have a brownfield factory. They want to digitalize some aspects. Now, is that a problem?
It is a huge problem, and you're absolutely right. Most of it actually is, you got more than 60 million small to medium-sized enterprises, and most of them are brownfields. So they don't need fancy big metaverses. They will need to have a simple connectivity, and this is what we also provide. So there's a lot of sensors in the meanwhile that you can retroactively fit to any kind of pumps, valves, whatever that is. You can then wirelessly connect them and have them machine learning, artificial intelligence look into anomaly detection. All of that is possible already today. And we make this for buildings, we make this for machinery, we make this for grids. So that way we can do what we call brownfield digitalization.
Improvising a brownfield factory is very much a Siemens interest.
Absolutely, and as we discussed also today, is we try to drink our own champagne, that is, being the customer zero. So the transformation of our own factory in Culver has really demonstrated that you can do something like that.
Yes, it's a 50-year-old factory.
It's a 50-year-old factory, right? And so really with startling successes when it comes down to higher productivity, higher flexibility, and better yield.
Okay. Digitalization also means a lot of consumption of power.
Yes.
So how does Siemens offer its solutions? When you offer digitalization solutions, you are also encouraging more carbon emissions.
Well, a couple of points. Number one is we provide the tools that enable digitalization. It's usually being operated by our customers, except that if we run the software for our customers as a service, then you're right. The way we approach this is, of course, through PPAs, so really power purchasing agreements. Also, Siemens has a RE100 commitment and pledge where in our own operations we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. So all of this is happening. There are studies, though, and this is very interesting, the question is digitalization actually helping for decarbonization, or is it actually contributing to...
They seem to be contradictory.
They seem to be contradictory. Now, if you take the math, the studies, all the scholars would say, round about the ICT sector has about 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Mm-hmm. But because of the power that it has in terms of efficiency, productivity, everything that it can bring, it can contribute to 40% of greenhouse gas reduction. So if you take that, you would have a level of 1 to 10. Yes, you need to look at net and cross, but I think the net benefits are purely there.
Okay. Well, let me come back to this digital twin and the state-of-the-art factories that Siemens helps to set up. It would be expensive. Do you think that with the coming of these kinds of state-of-the-art factories, the small and medium enterprises in countries like India could get left behind? Yeah. Is it likely to create a bigger dichotomy between the big and the small?
So the way I think about this is actually not size. I think it's more what you mentioned earlier, is about greenfield and brownfield. And let me give you an example. We are working with a lot of startups that use those digital tools from the very, very beginning. And the way we provide them to them is through software as a service. In other words, you don't need to have your own IT administrator. You don't need to have all the competencies how to install it. You don't need to have your data centers and so on. So you just plug into it and you consume it from the cloud usually. So we really make it very simple. Then you have a subscription, which means you only pay as you go, as you use, right? So therefore, it makes it very predictable. As a matter of fact, in particular for startup, it's great because they don't have cash at all. So for them, preservation of cash is huge. So in that sense, the SaaS model is beautiful. It works for them beautifully. So the digital twin is not necessarily just for the big guys. It is also in particular for smaller to medium-sized enterprises. The biggest challenge is the brownfield, greenfield conversation. That is indeed a challenge.
Okay. Now, coming back to decarbonization, it appears to have got a back seat after the Ukraine war. I mean, people just went back to coal because that was the emergency, and fuel and gas, oil and gas were both scarce. Do you think that that trend is going to continue? That people will pay less attention because of the emergency? Did it push back the decarbonization in a big way?
So numbers would suggest that for sure the dynamic has slowed down a little bit. On the other hand, though, if you look at all the large companies around the world, all of them have some shape or form of a target to become carbon neutral sooner or later, the majority being 2030. Now, the trick is 2030 looks far away. But in industry, in industrial setting, usually your investment cycles are at least 5 years. So think about it. So you're almost there. You have to act today in order to make this work. And in Europe, in particular, in other geographies, you have a lot of carbon taxes. And these carbon taxes, I can tell you, they will increase and increase the closer we get to 2030. So the pressure will rise. And I believe those will win that act already now, because it's going to get more expensive as we get closer to 2030.
Okay.